All right, welcome everybody, and thank you for checking out the Adam Messer Show. I'm your host, Adam Messer, and my special guest today is Tony Ray Morris. He is an author, he's a poet, a professor, and an all around swell guy. Thanks so much, Tony, for being here with us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well this morning, Adam. Thank you so much for inviting me to your program. Looking forward to talking to you today about our work and the new novel that has just come out, Deep River Blues, and having a good conversation.
Yeah, me too. And everybody tuning in. So a little back story here. You probably have heard me talking about the word beat poetry and the different poets and whatever. And you might have seen my video of Tony. Uh, I met Tony last year at E Shaver Booksellers when Brendan Walsh came down, and Tony was one of the featured poets. And I loved your poetry, Tony. I feel like you have a very deep rooted, down to earth storytelling. Um, and I picked up Deep River Blues last night, and I read the first chapter. So I love your visual representation and the way you describe things. And I tell you what, it's everybody listening. It's a murder mystery, and so Tony, can you give us like a little I don't know, like the book blurb version of Deep River Blues?
Sure, absolutely, and had a great time last year with that poetry reading. Brendan's a great guy, and it was really a fun. We had a fun gathering of people there at East Shavers, and it was really a pleasure to meet you. And I'm so happy you told me that after you heard the readings that it inspired you to start writing poetry again. And since then, you've put together and produced a couple of chapbooks and got yourself back into the poetry world, and that's as exciting as anything for me to know that something that I'm doing is helping other people to be inspired to do their own creative work.
Oh yeah, I love
so
it.
yeah,
I
a lot
loved
of
it. It was great. It was really wonderful.
yeah, sure. And you're talking about the descriptive passages, and I was just reading through, and it makes it sound a little. I don't know. I don't want to be too academic, but I was reading last night Walden again, the second chapter in Walden, Henry David Thoreau's Walden, and that's probably where I first started getting really inspired with that kind of descriptive writing was through those early American Romantic writers, Thoreau and we're reading through Moby Dick and I was a big fan, and am a big fan of William Faulkner too, and so I actually have to pull back a little bit on those descriptive passages when I'm writing the novel as compared to my poetry. In the poetry, I can really just sock in all those descriptions and really kind of you're trying to evoke those images and feelings in the poems. So my editor for the novel, they were both kind of coming back to me at times saying, well, we might want to pull back a little bit on this passage here.
I loved it though. Like I tell you, Tony, it was refreshing because often you don't see that level of description in modern writing. And speaking of going back to the classics or whatever, this week I started reading. Ray Bradbury had a lecture in 2001, right before he passed away, and he talked about if you want to be a better writer, you should read an essay, a poem, and a short story a night for 1,000 nights. And so I've been doing that, and this week, actually Monday, I started doing this. I picked up. I've had it, but I picked up the collected works of Shakespeare. So I've been reading the sonnets. I picked up George Bernard Shaw, and I've been reading his essays. And then I picked up Ray Bradbury. There was a book that published in 2002, right before he passed, of 100 of Ray Bradbury's best short stories or whatever. So I've been reading And when I started reading your book last night, this is everybody kind of like a little backseat story here. Tony sent me a message yesterday. We got reconnected, and I was like, you know what? Today's a great opportunity. I would love to talk with you today, and it just happened. So I picked up your book because I was like, oh, I like your poetry, and I, want to check it out. And I know you're going to send me, the copy or whatever in the mail. That's awesome. I can't wait to see that. But I was like, I've got to, check this out. And when I started reading, I fell in love with the way I love the way you do your poetry anyway, but I fell in love with the way you started doing your storytelling, because you don't see that level in most fiction work, in my opinion. You don't see a lot of
Right.
The illusions kind of just being built, like when not to be I don't want to give away any kind of spoilers here, but when
I don't think you're going to in the first chapter.
Well, it's with the novel, you start off with a serious problem. There's been a girl that's been found, her body's been found, and she's murdered, and it's in this small town or whatever, and you got just reading and I was visualizing, I could actually see this girl, as you described her. I was like, wow, this is, it's very hard for me to get into fiction that, because I'm so used to, I did in high school, did AP English, we read Shakespeare, we read a lot of the classics. In college, I didn't study literature in college, but I did business administration and information systems. And so, I guess I kind of got spoiled because I had an awesome English teacher named Mr. Beach for that AP
Thank
English.
goodness.
And yeah, and I've just been spoiled about fiction ever since. Now, nonfiction, I'm a little bit more lenient because, that's more of a personal narrative. But when it comes to fiction, I love the fact that you have really, you drove this and you dove deep. I'm probably not even saying it correctly, but you dove deep into, the description of the characters, the description of the town. I literally felt like I was there in the scene as I was reading.
Well, good.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to capture. So one of the goals I had when I put this together, this is a crime, a mystery thriller genre, but I did want to infuse it with literary elements. And so basically the plot is that there's a body of a young woman is washed up under a bridge, and the local sheriff, Cord McRae, has to investigate the murder. He's not, this, like you said, it is a small town. The novel's set in eastern Tennessee, up in the Smoky Mountains, right at the kind of the North Carolina Tennessee border, right across the border there, where the Smoky Mountain National Forest is, and so the little town of Falston butts up
right in the heart of Appalachia.
That's right, and so he thinks that there's a couple other kind of complications. There's a new commune, some local hip kind of what he might call hipsters have moved into this commune, and she thinks that the girl might be from the commune. And then there's kind of a local hillbilly mafia run by a man called Thorn Reavers. His name is Thornton Reavers, but he goes by Thorn Reavers, and so he runs the local hillbilly mafia. And so there's these complications that a young vet that's just back from Afghanistan has been killed also, and he has to investigate that. So Cord is he kind of jumps into this, and he has some domestic problems going on too. But the big thing is I wanted to kind of capture, if I could, capture the feel of that entire region there that I think gets short shrift often in our popular culture. We often think of the quote unquote the hillbilly as kind of the backwards and less intelligent and just not sophisticated, and often our society society and our culture paints them in a negative light. And so one of my goals was to try to humanize the people in this region and give them like rounded personalities. And but you're talking about that the description of the murdered girl, and probably the passage that you made you think of it is in the second or third page in. I could read it if you'd like for me to. It's just this little.
Oh, I would love. Yeah, I would love it. I was going to ask you if you would do a reading for us, because and not to cut you off, Tony, but one of the things that I enjoy about the level of writing is that it is relatable. Even though you have a lot of like deep descriptions, there's nothing in there that's highbrow. That's like, it's something that everybody, I feel like, if you enjoy reading, I feel like that anybody could get into this story. It's not like it totally flowed. I didn't feel any disjointed part at all while I was reading. And I only read the first chapter, but usually to me, if you can't get past the first couple of pages of a book, you might not enjoy the book, and I don't think that's a fair assessment all the time, because some books are a little slow starters or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah, but for me, that's like if I can't get through the first pages, first couple of pages with an interest and continuing to read, I don't really push it, But I didn't feel that with yours. I read the first chapter, last night before I went to bed, and I was like, man, this is going to be really fun to talk about today.
Good, excellent. So
yeah, I'd love to hear a chapter, like a little reading or whatever. That'd be great.
Yeah, well, I was just going to read, because you mentioned that you got to the part in describing the young woman, and so what happens is he finds the body, and he and his deputy are kind of down by the shore, looking at the body there and examining the body before they take it out and take the body to the morgue, and so he stands up and kind of reflects back for a moment about how he could picture her coming down, kind of floating down the river. And so it's just one I'm just going to read one paragraph here. He stared out across the river, high above steep bluffs that rose sharply from the shallow shores. A red-tailed hawk cut through a cornflower blue sky under rippled bands of clouds, shrill whistle echoing off the surface of the chill water. He pictured the girl floating down the river. Her loose peasant skirt rippled and spread like dappled yellow leaves floating on the surface of a current that furled and eddied, swirling around legs and torso. Her head and arms would have plunged, submerged, then resurfaced as she dipped and spun into each new trough, or edged around the smooth, slick surface of stones that split the wide, slow course of the river. A slight wind would have breezed across her body as she rolled onto her back, floating for a moment, waves of long red hair fanning out to frame smooth, marbled features, green eyes staring briefly into the infinite before rolling face down again to follow the quickening surge of the old, unceasing pull. So that's kind of the description that he sits there and imagines her coming down the river, floating down there, the dead body floating down the river.
And the neat thing about, I feel like with that passage is it's so descriptive. I mean, like I was listening to you, I was just envisioning it as we're, as I'm listening to, as you're talking and reading it. And I think that's a great indicator of a storyteller, member. So can you talk about your career as an author and as a writer? Can you talk to us, about that? And
Sure.
How did you get started? And
yeah, well, I mean, so I was actually I didn't come into writing till fairly late in life. Really, I had. In my younger days, I was not a good student in high school, and so I didn't go to college right out of high school. I worked around a lot of different odd jobs and ended up the last 10 years before I started to college at 33. I worked at a factory manufacturing carbon paper. This is back in the days before computers, and so they used carbon paper to make copies and for invoicing and such. And so I was working in this old factory making carbon paper, running machine, and it's dirty and hard and hot and and then when I was 33, I decided I wanted to try to make a change in my life, and I started college, and I started at a community college up in North Carolina, and didn't really expect to get anything beyond an associate's degree. Actually, I was just going back to see if I could figure out what I wanted to do, because I had no idea where I wanted to go, and ended up kind of like you, having a really good comp teacher, and who came to me after class and asked me if I had ever thought about being an English major. I had some ability as a writer, I didn't know that. I mean, I didn't really had never ever thought of writing. And so I said, well, no, not really. And then she encouraged me to enter a school contest at the university, or that the college was holding. And reluctantly I entered it, and I placed in it. And then the student newspaper was over there taking pictures when we got our awards. And the editor of the newspaper asked me if I'd ever thought of being writing for a newspaper. And I said no. And he said, well, we need good writers, so come on over. Obviously you can write. So I started working for the student newspaper, and then I found a place in journalism. Actually, I thought that was when I kind of discovered journalism, and got some stringer reporting jobs for the Charlotte Observer, and then once I finished up my associate's degree there, I actually did much better in my scholastic endeavors than I thought I ever would. It was amazing to me, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll continue this on and get my bachelor's degree. And I transferred to UNC Charlotte, and they didn't have a journalism degree over there, so I majored in English and double minored in communication and journalism. And when I got ready to graduate, I had a job at NBC, and I was a writer on the medical news desk at NBC, and I thought that's where I was going to be for the rest of my life. What happened was I got invited to a poetry reading by a professor. This is in the last semester of my senior year, and he was doing a poetry reading at a place called Lottie Dawes Tea House, and I'm like, oh my gosh, really? Lottie Dawes Tea House? I mean, I'm a blue collar working guy that come from a lower middle class background, and didn't really I don't know, I just didn't know if I fit into Lottie Tea House. But I went there, and he read some poetry, and it is kind of like you. I was inspired immediately, and I went home that night and wrote several poems, and all those poems have been published since, the ones that I wrote that night, and then I got published in Southern Poetry Review fairly quickly, and so I thought maybe I'll pursue this further, and decided to get a master's degree. And the people at NBC said that I had a job waiting for me when I finished my master's, and go ahead and do it. And so I pursued the master's, and during that time I wrote a thesis, a book of poems, and then when I finished that up, I decided I'd head on down to apply for some PhD programs, and got into Florida State, and went down there, and for the many years, that's what I did. I wrote poetry. I didn't write any fiction at all. The way this is, long story short, though, I got the job at Armstrong back in 2004. They hired me to teach journalism, and so I came down to teach the journalism classes, and then ended up moving over into creative writing as the years went by, and maybe I started a writer's retreat at Ossabaw Island, which is a barrier island here off the coast of Georgia. It's a wonderful place, and I wanted to maybe create some writing community, and so I started this retreat out at Ossabaw Island, and we put on this retreat a couple times a year. And while I was out there, I get the opportunity to invite a lot of good writers from around the country to teach, and people come there to learn. And one of the writers that I invited was Craig Johnson, who's the author of the Longmire series of books. In fact, Longmire was turned into a TV series for a while. You can catch it on Netflix. It's several seasons on Netflix. It started out Annie and then moved over to Netflix. And great writer. He's written about, I guess, 14 novels here. And I read the first chapter of this that I just read to you. I read that first chapter at one of these retreats, and Craig heard it and said, "You need to get that published."
Wow!
And so that was 6-7 years ago, and I had just finished one chapter. That's all I had finished, and so that's what I told him. I said, "Well, I've just started it," and he said, "Well, you need to finish it, and we need to see what we can do to get that thing published. It's pretty good." And so I worked, in the last 6 years, I've been working to finish it, and then, refining agents and get, it went around to a lot of the big houses, and finally got picked up at a smaller publishing house, a Northampton House Press. They're out of Virginia, and great folks up there, and have been kind and supportive, and so it's one of those things. It's a very getting novels is published is tough, man. I'm telling you. Anything is tough. I mean, poetry. My poetry. I've 4 books of poems out now, two chapter books and 2 full books, and it's a fun world to be in. You got to kind of be persistent and just keep on keeping on, and if you do that, then and if the work is up to standards, and you have a little bit of luck on your side, well, then you'll get somebody that want to publish it for you. And so I feel very blessed, and I'm very grateful for the reception that the novel's getting so far. One of the publicists that I was talking to they were telling me that they've surveyed over 100,000 readers, and found out that many readers, they actually, other than the New York Times reviews, they actually decide what books to read based on the Amazon reader reviews, those star reviews on Amazon. So any of the listeners out there that decide to maybe go out and check my book out, if you like it, well, then make sure you hit it up there on that Amazon, and that helps a lot, actually.
Oh, I completely agree. The Amazon algorithm that they have, it's temperamental, because one day you might be in the top 10 or whatever, top 100, but one of the stats that I heard from a publishing friend is that Amazon puts out almost 7,000 books a day, and to hit that, to hit the top 100 or whatever on Amazon, some people hit bestsellers and whatever, that's awesome, but to even get into like the top 100 of any genre on Amazon, I feel like is a really great feat, because 7,000 books a day, that's an incredible number of books, and we're inundated with so much entertainment, digitally. I love the thing I love about the poetry and going to the reading, and what just flowed in me and just kind of hit me and touched me was it was a way to reconnect with the world, to see your vision through your poetry, and it's not always like, when I say your vision, I don't mean like this is like, your whole world vision of whatever. I'm just talking about like a slice of, a window pane of, just a little sliver of, an insight into your mindset. Right. And I felt so, I just felt so invigorated by it. And I didn't realize, Tony, that we had so much in common, because I went back to school. I graduated when I was 32 from college, and I worked. I'm from Ohio, from Cincinnati, and my family is all from Pineville, Kentucky, or Pineview, Kentucky, which is
okay.
Boone Park.
Well, my mom's family hails from Sinking Creek, Kentucky, which is right outside of.
Yeah, we might. Tony, we might be related. because I kid you not, I'm in a group on Facebook. It's called Stinking Creek, and Carol Golden, she does like a lot of family research and history, and like all the
Sure.
folks down there are related to each other. Like that little holler.
That seems like
Oh my gosh.
that's right.
Stinking Creek, of like a
Yes.
million things in the world, of all the people in the world, who would ever have heard of Stinking Creek? Oh my gosh, this is crazy.
Yeah, she came from a family of 12 brothers and sisters, and that's where I get my middle name from, Ray. She's the Ray side of the family.
Wow.
So
I'm gonna have to ask Carol. I'm gonna have to talk to Carol and say, hey, can you do some research here, because I might have found a distant cousin. But when you're telling me about that, it's crazy because I had to, right out of high school and all, I had to work, and my goal, my dream, like everybody's dream back in the day was like, oh, go to college, you'll do better or whatever, yada yada yada. Well, I was married, had kids, and I had to go back to school at night, and so they didn't offer. I wanted to do computer science, and they didn't offer that, so I ended up taking business. Well, one of the things that I always loved, especially from high school days, I was on the journalism staff, so I was on the newspaper. I used to love to write, and I had a teacher in college, David Taylor. I think you might know him, Dr. Taylor from Armstrong.
sure.
He had talked to me about
Yes.
doing some creative writing, and I love his stuff. Like one of the things that he said in the class was, we have to focus on the audience. Well, and he said this, I was like, oh my gosh. He said, give them what they want, give it to them real good. And that's something that's always just stuck with me. And
I like it.
and,
Yeah.
doing like the blue collar work or whatever. I actually do electrical work now, because I'd worked at the college for like 10 years doing, financial aid. I was financial aid director, but those jobs have dried up a lot. And especially in our area, there's only so many places that you can work. And, I worked for a for-profit school, and they went under. And, the state schools, unless you're teaching, it's just the positions there, it's just kind of limited, So I earned my master's in business administration. I earned a master's in information systems, but I didn't go on for the doctorate. But I'm just listening to you. I'm like, man, this is like, we really could be cousins. I'll tell you.
It's life is like that sometimes.
Yeah, it's such a small world.
It really.
Maybe that's one of the reasons why I feel like I can relate to your work so much, because your background and your perspective on that. Because I feel like literature. It's kind of like the thing when you're talking about with the hillbillies. People get like people like to read, but I also feel like reading kind of gets a bad rap sometimes. Like if you're a lit nerd, people are like, oh, they have a certain perspective, like, oh, you must like this, you must like that, and like, no, I like a lot of different things. I like stuff from Shakespeare down to Pulp Fiction. I don't have a
well, I think that's, and I'm not putting myself up in this category, but the people that I love to read the most are people whose works, no matter where they are, seem to reflect the larger perspectives of humanity.
Yes.
I mean, I want to believe that there's something that connects us all together, no matter where we're from, no matter who, no matter what our backgrounds are, and no matter, even, different cultures. And so I think the best fiction and poetry kind of cuts across a lot of those cultural and ethnic and political divides. And, I was late to reading, actually. Again, I never, if you'd have asked me when I started college, what are your chances of being a writer? I would have said there's no chances at all, because I hate writing. I mean, I hated writing, I thought. But what had really happened is when I was young, I hated penmanship. In other words, I had associated writing, because we didn't have computers when I was coming up. I'm 60. So for me, that the writing was like out. I didn't want to do that. And then I came to reading very late. I was, I think, 10 or maybe almost 11 before I really started reading. And the first novel I read was Huckleberry Finn. And I I fell in love with that novel, and once I read that, I was off and running. But those stories took, I could relate, even though I was not born in the 19th century. I wasn't, running around in the woods barefooted with Huck and Tom. I didn't know any of that necessarily, that life, but still at 11 years old, it took me into that world, and I was able to relate to it because of the humanity in it. And so I think, it's important to try to pull humanity into our stories, whatever stories they are. And I think Faulkner talked about his little postage stamp of the world. His Yoknapatawpha County. All the stories in all his novels are set in this small county, and yet in this small county you get a vision of the universe or the larger world. I think, even though it's all set in this small county in Mississippi, and so in my story with Acre County, I hope to do the same thing. I've created a whole kind of this entire world that's encapsulated in this small county, and I'm gonna, as if this novel does well enough, well then I'm hoping to write a series, and so if I do that, well then these characters will grow inside this world, and will hopefully capture something that will resonate with people no matter what their backgrounds or and their experiences are, and it'll lend something to their life understanding.
I completely agree with you. My favorite stories, and everything for me goes back to storytelling. I love storytelling, and I love storytelling that focuses on the human condition, like you're talking about, and humanity. And I feel we have more in common as people than we have that we are different. We have differences, and we have whatever, but as human beings, we have a lot in common. And one of the things that I've enjoyed kind of going back to reading some classic literature this week versus mostly reading almost exclusively nonfiction for the last 25 years, I have enjoyed reading like Ray Bradbury, for example. The short stories I've been reading this week of his, they all deal about, with fear and living and loving and, enjoying life and then not enjoying life. You just kind of get this roller coaster of how, a person lives. And
yes,
I feel that, and this is a question I want to ask you. I feel that that's really important, but it's also very difficult sometimes to illustrate. How do you approach that with telling a story and making it realistic and relatable?
Well, okay. So I think part of the way I need to answer that is by going back to the beginning of our conversation when you were talking about kind of the focus on the details and the descriptions. Oftentimes, the focusing on the particulars in the setting and kind of pulling in those things into the plot and the storyline really start pulling out and shaping the emotions and the atmosphere around which the action of the story is taking place. So, often when I'm teaching my students the fiction classes, I'm often really pushing them to fill in those that setting and the background and what's going on around the characters as they're in dialogue or as they're, there's action going on and they're moving through a certain geography of place and time. And I think oftentimes young writers, they pay short shrift to that detail, and I think those are the details that really start supporting and adding to the emotional content and the psychological content of what's happening to the characters and how the characters are relating to each other, right? So because you can't, you don't want to, as we say a lot, the whole show don't tell. Well, we have to tell sometimes, but we're also showing. But the part of the way of showing those emotional moments are by setting up the atmosphere around the characters, the players as they are, the players in that particular world that you've set up. So that's one way, I think, is really infusing the whole world with. To me, the more you can paint the picture with the words, the more alive that scene becomes, and so each scene needs to kind of be filled out. And I often, for me, I guess I'm very visual, imaginatively visual in the sense of when I'm writing the stories, it's like in my mind, I can picture it like a movie kind of going on.
That's how I see the
it
too. I see it as like a movie scene. Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Right.
How do you like when you say young writers? See, this is another thing that I think too. People, and just a personal opinion, when you say young writers, you don't necessarily mean age. Do you mean like new?
Yeah. So that's right. New people that are new to it, to people that are trying, maybe just because many of the writers we get that come out to our retreat at Ossabaw, they are the average age of the writer that comes out to Ossabaw is probably 40, actually. But many of them are young in the sense of just they're kind of dipping their toe into really getting serious about creative writing, about fiction or creative nonfiction or poetry. And so that is what I mean. And there's the other side of the young writer thing is that it's I think it's not impossible, and I'm not going to say one shouldn't start writing earlier, but I think age brings some writing wisdom. Maybe that's a good way of putting it. I think it's not a bad thing to experience some life. I think it helps one's writing.
I agree. I mean, like that's just what I was going to say. Was I feel like everybody has the ability to be. We're all storytellers. I mean, like everything we do, even if you don't write, we're all storytellers. And I feel like one of the things I can really see in your work, especially now that you told me more about your background, I can really see in your work how your life experiences have, molded you and have, influenced your writing. And I try to write the same way, where I try to write where something that I would enjoy reading, and also something that's relatable to other people. Because honestly, nobody wants to read a boring story. I mean, like, have you ever had a person tell you a joke and, the punchline just fell flat?
Sure.
That's what it reminds me of. It's like, we start reading this and like they did this and they walked down the hall and they did that.
I've actually been the person that told the joke and the punchline went fast.
So you get it. So I think there's something too. Like when you were kind of accidentally, like just it was a set of circumstances where you came into journalism and all that. And a personal side here, I actually write for the Savannah Morning News as a freelance journalist. Been doing it since 2014, so I love it. And it's always nice to talk to a fellow journalist. And I don't do hardcore stuff. I don't do like daily beat stuff. I do like event journalism or whatever. So, but when you kind of just like going back to the question here, when you kind of accidentally fell into this, like it was, like a nice little surprise. And when you had these opportunities, appear, or these opportunities come about, because, some way or another, you came to mind when somebody was thinking about, something. What was your approach to, like, when you said, no, I've never done journalism before. No, I've never written before. I've never done this. Or what was your approach to jumping into that? How did you bridge that gap?
Right. So I'll just, okay, dude, here's the deal. For many years, I love alcohol, and I loved drugs, and I did a lot of them. And I'll just say that when I was a little over 30, I got to a place where I loved them so much that they were controlling my life too much, and I had to change. And so, as part of that change, I also decided that there's some new directions that I had to take philosophically, and some of those directions that I took, I had some really good advisors, and so some of the advice that I got was that trying to go in the outdoor or up the down escalator, and instead go through the doors of opportunity that opened to me, even if I was afraid that my fear was getting in the way. In fact, the phrase that was used to tell me about it was "F your fears." Right? So
I love that.
So, in other words, yeah, you might be afraid, but that doesn't matter. Do it anyhow. If it's not going to be harmful to you, then do it and try it and see what happens. And so when those opportunities came up, I had to ask myself the question, well, what's the worst that can happen? And, let me give it a shot. And so that's, even though I didn't want to do the writing contest. And my teacher at the time said, what's the worst thing that can happen, Tony? And she literally asked this. I said, I don't know. And she said, the worst thing that can happen is you don't win a contest at a small community college. Wow. Who cares? So why don't you just enter the contest either way? And I'm like, okay. And then when the guy came with the journalism, I thought, okay, well, maybe this is an opportunity opening up for me. So I went over and I knew nothing about journalism. And, 2 months later, I'm the editor at their little school newspaper, right?
Wow.
And so all along the way, even with the poetry, I never would have thought about poetry had I not, taking the opportunity to go to Lottie Dawes and listen to this poetry reading and say, wow, I didn't know that was, I knew poetry. I'd read, by this time I had my bachelor's degree in English, and I'd, read a lot of the 19th century, early 20th century poets. And, I knew that poetry, but I guess I hadn't been exposed enough to kind of the contemporary poetry. And this poetry was relatable and it was personal. And I was like, wow, I think I could do that. But even after I did that, I didn't know what to do with it. I remember sitting there, it's maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm looking at the computer thinking, okay, so what the hell does a poet do?
Yeah.
Because I knew what a journalist did. They'd get a job at a newspaper or a news organization, and they went out and they got, they made some money. But how, I was thinking, how do you make money as a poet? What is it? So I actually, went to school the next week and knew one of the faculty members that she was a poet. I could tell because she had these long scarves. She always walked around with these long scarves, and she looked like a poet. Yeah. And, hey, would you mind reading these poems and telling me, if they're any good or whatever? And so she did. And then, she said, look, a week later we got together. She said, you're pretty good at this. She said, if you want to, I'll meet with you once a week and we can talk about your poetry. And so I was like, okay,
wow.
I'll try.
You found a mentor. You found a mentor unknowingly.
I did exactly. Wow. And so same with so along the way, I just kept taking those steps. I didn't, I was scared about applying to the graduate school. Then I was scared about applying to the PhD program. And, I told, again, one of my advisors, I was like, okay, I've applied to all these different PhD programs around the country. So what am I going to do? He said, have you been accepted to any yet? I was like, well, no. He said, well, then don't worry about it.
Nice.
Once you get accepted, you can make a decision if you want to go there or not. But,
when you get to it, right?
Right. So I think it's just a matter of walking, stepping through our fears and having a little bit of hope and faith in the future that things are going to work out the way they're supposed to work out. And all I can do is kind of put one foot in front of the other and do the best. I know this sounds hokey maybe, but it's just
no, it doesn't sound hokey at all. I feel like it's such
do the best I can one day at a time.
Yeah,
right?
I feel like it's such a great way to approach. Because that's one of the things, like I love leadership, I love self-development, and I feel like that's one of the great things that a person can do is to learn how to say yes to things and learn how to say no to other things. And, say no to your fears if they're gonna, stop you from doing something, creative or something that you want to try out. Say yes to your fears of like you're gonna get hurt,
Right.
But I love that.
Yes.
I love that idea. I mean, like, I feel like, Tony, that is actually more common. People don't really think it, like, they think all the stars have to align and all the things have to align. But I really feel like, like your story is more common. That's actually how I hear more people talking about, how they got into something than not. I mean, other than like legacy babies who, they had a silver spoon in their mouth. But even that, I mean, like,
Sure.
how many times have you heard of a legacy baby, being, successful in something that they did all themselves? I'm not talking about those folks. I'm
Right.
talking about the folks that, they had grit and they did the grind, and they're like, well, like you said, what does a poet do? How does a poet make money? How can I do this? And you ask those questions. You had an open mindset, and you ask those questions, and then the other thing I love is,
And by the way, the answer to that question is they don't.
That's exactly. But the thing I love about it is, like, yeah,
but we find other ways to supplement our money while we're writing poetry.
That's actually a great. I'm so glad that you said that. That's a great segue, because a lot of folks have the same thing, kind of like with the hillbillies, misconception of who they are, what they are.
Yes.
There's this. I love talking with the doers. I love talking with the people that actually, they do. And the working class, I call them working class creators. We've got our 9 to 5 gig, and then, from 5 to midnight or whatever, or 2 in the morning or 1 in the morning, we're working on our creative stuff. So can you kind of share some more about, like, because you got, a lot of experience with the writing, and, a lot of folks, and, can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, are you talking about like my workaday? How I go about my daily making that living?
Like how you continue, like, because the 9 to 5 gig, we all have to pay our bills, but I mean, like, how you combine, like, okay, you got a 9 to 5 gig, and you also found the time to write a novel. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that it's almost exactly how you explain. Now, when I was writing most of this novel, I had at the time my son was 3 years old, and my ex, she is an ICU nurse, and so she was working as a nurse, and I was oftentimes taking care of him, and also teaching at Armstrong, and so my time for writing the novel usually happened between, exactly like you said, between 8 or 9. And once I could get him down to bed and sleeping, well, then I would sit down and start working on the novel. And that usually happened between 8 at night to 1 in midnight or 1 in the morning. And it's in many ways still that way. I mean, I've learned actually over the years how to. I mean, I used to have, when I first started, I had my special writing place, right? I had my own desk, and it's got to be sitting in the right place and looking out a window or whatever, right? But now I've learned I have to write. I've had to learn to write wherever I am. It's not quite, because life is just too busy. Yeah. There's too much going on. I was just recently married, and we bought we have a place out in the country that 3.5, 4 acres, and I've had I've been doing a lot of clearing in the land, and then the house was built. It's an old house built in 1875, so a lot of work in the house, and then we have bees that we're keeping, and we have a little garden, and so it's just and we got 4 kids.
Wow.
I'm dealing with. So it's a busy life. It's busy, and you take those things where you can get it. And my wife, she's a writer also. She's a poet, Danielle Lejeune, and she's she has work. She's working on a new book now. She used to raise pigs in Iowa, and so she's writing a book about pigs. But she also has a poetry that was published about a year and a half ago. So we're both writers and we're both teachers, and we got the kids, and we just, we kind of grab time every chance we get to do our creative work. But a lot of times now it's like in between that life stuff, and making the arrangements to do that, you have to be very, I think, intentional, right? I mean, I think I'm oftentimes reminding her, hey, I know this is going on, but give the time to your creative side, because if you don't, you're not going to be happy. And then if you're not happy, you're not going to be happy. So, so make sure putting that time aside. And then she reminds me of the same thing. She'll walk by and say, hey, are you working on that new, the new novel, or you writing that, you working on that poem that you talked about the other day, or, and I'm like, oh yeah, I need it. So she'll say, get your butt up there and put some time in on it. Cause it's at this point, sometimes that stuff, it's easy to get lost in the shuffle of day-to-day living. It's just day-to-day living, man. You gotta pay those dues, and life is like that. It's not it's I think the people that really get the stuff done, or like you said, maybe, I don't know if the working class is right or whatever word you want to use it, but I think you're right. I think it's those people that kind of say, I'm going to push beyond what what other people would maybe. And, when some people maybe are sitting down and watching their TV shows, and there's nothing wrong with that. Believe me, I love my own TV. I'm a TV addict at times. So I'm not putting that down. But, when people are doing that, some other people are not. They get up and they do their other creative stuff. And, that's creativity is, of course, way beyond just writing. It's, I love craftspersons. I love people who work with wood, people who work in stone, people who paint, and artists and craftspersons, even people that do, if you're a gardener, whatever it is. I mean, all those things we do that are outside of the normal making our living, that contribute something to the world. I mean, I think that's part of I would never have done this had I thought that I couldn't try to contribute something, that my work doesn't contribute something of worth to the world. I'll just put it like that. Yeah. You can when I say that, but I just can't imagine. Some of my students want to say, I'm writing for myself, and I'm like, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's called a diary or a journal. But if you're going to write, you're writing for other people, and so I write my stories. I don't write them for me. I mean, I write them because maybe I'm thinking I want to put the story down, but I write them for people. I want people to enjoy my stories and my poems. That's my only really. That really is what it's all about for me. I want to give people they can enjoy.
Right? I mean, like Dr. David Taylor, that's one of the reasons why that stuck with me. Give them what they want, give it to them real good. Because it's just one of those things.
I've written this quote, by the way, and I will use it and give him credit for it, by the way, because I love it.
And it's always stuck with me because this guy, he's got a PhD, I think, in English or literature. So I don't know exactly what it is. It's in writing, and he teaches writing, and that's one of the things that always stuck with me. Just like what you're talking about, like and earlier when I was saying I like to write stuff that I enjoy to read, but I'm not writing for myself. I'm writing stuff that I like, for example, fiction. I like to write horror fiction. I like to write sci-fi and stuff like that, because that's the kind of stuff I enjoy reading. I'm not writing it as a like you said, like a diary. And I think there's a big distinction between people that they're just writing for themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. People that they journal and they do diaries, stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's some folks that are like, they don't have the confidence to share it with anybody. And I understand that. But really, the stories, I feel like when you're talking about that, I feel like the stories are, if you're trying to tell a story and make a ding in the universe, or put something out there to the world, even if it touches one person, you've made a difference.
Sure. And, it's so funny you say, because you mentioned about, it's okay to just do it for ourselves. But we, people like us, I think, there's got to be, and I tell this to my students all the time too, to be a writer, you've got to be a little bit arrogant. because because you're the kind of person that thinks that what you're writing, other people will actually give a damn about.
Yeah. You gotta want to drink your own tea.
Put that in there.
Yeah, it is kind of funny you say that, because like there's sometimes where I'll write something, I'm like, man, this is the best thing ever, and then there's other times I'm like, oh, this is total garbage.
Well, that's good. That's good. You have a good self-critic is good, man. We go beyond that, and we need our good editors too. I've got to give the editors, both the people that have looked over my poems many times before. I mean, this is the other thing. I rarely publish my poems without at least two other people reading them and giving me some feedback, because I have to have those trusted people out there that I know that they've got, and that they can give me good, honest feedback, and they'll tell me when they're going, Tony, what the hell are you doing here? What is this line about? It just doesn't even make sense. Or you've pushed it way too far now.
Yeah.
We don't need either. You're trying to tell us instead of showing us, so just stop it. Or whatever it is. And I love those good advisors and editors.
I love the fact, because I was actually having, this is synchronicity again. I was actually having the same conversation. I've had talking about trusted readers. I've had that like the last 2 weeks. I've had that conversation with a couple different people, and you're actually the first person that's mentioned talking about trusted readers. I've been talking about it, but the other people are like, what do you mean? And I was like, folks that will tell you about yourself if you're not doing right.
Yes.
Trusted readers.
Yes.
They're not.
Yes, I don't know how people go without them.
And like, because we all have our fans, and we all have, like the folks are like, oh, Tony, I love everything you do. Adam, I love everything you do. And they will never tell you, anything negative, because they're afraid to hurt your feelings. And
that's useless to me almost.
Well,
my ego needs it. My ego needs it, but for my writing, I need the people that are going to show, tell me what's not working.
Right. And I think the difference between a trusted reader, in my opinion, and I'm just talking from my own experience, but just my opinion, I think the difference between like a trusted reader and a critic is, a critic is someone who doesn't know you. A trusted reader is someone who does know you, but they're willing to give you constructive criticism. And I think when you said that, oh my gosh, it was like yesterday when we were talking, I was like, this is synchronicity. This is God speaking. This is the universe. Whatever folks they belief system is. But I was like, this is supposed to be like, I'm supposed to be talking with you right now.
Well, I think, don't you think? I mean, at least for me, I think part of the reason I'm very grateful. I'm so grateful that I started my writing career out in journalism, because journalism taught me so much about compression of the language. It taught me so much about having an editor who was going to tell me, that this is not working, and so I had to get used to somebody early on telling me what was not good and what didn't work in my articles. And I thank God for good editors at the newspaper, at the Charlotte Observer, when I first started writing for them, and they can sit down with me and show me how to write a good lead, or how to write a good, a good, hard copy or soft copy, whichever it was I was writing. Those men and women that I worked with were so valuable. And then later on, when I became a creative writer, I think I was not as a lot of times I think with creative writers, we're very protective of our work, right? We write it and we think it's ours, and anybody says anything about it, it's like, wait a minute, you've just shot me in the heart. And so often I'm remembering, I have to remember, this writing is not me. This is not me, and yes, it may represent something about me, but it is not me. Once I've written it down, it's on paper, and I give it to you, it doesn't belong to me anymore. I mean, it's a shared product now between the two of us, and so I have to kind of learn to let it go and get that feedback from you. And so yes, I think our experience, since you're a journalist too, helps us to be open-minded to the good, honest criticism that's trying to help the people that are trying to help us to be better writers.
I completely agree, and I also feel like asking better questions too.
Yes.
Asking those better questions, and like being able to turn a critical eye on ourselves, with our work. Because I agree with you. Like when it's done, it's like a picture. That was a moment in time, and that was at a certain place, certain time, certain situation, or whatever. but it's a picture. It represented a memory, and I feel like
Right.
that's the same thing with the writing. It's like when you finish it, and you put as much polish on it as you can, and you put it out there to the world. It is the world's,
Yes,
I
that's
love
right.
that you said that.
You're
I'm
right.
so like that's so neat. I know we've got to wrap it up here, Tony. Where can people find your work? And I definitely want to have you back on the show. I know this one we're doing a podcast because of the limited time, but I definitely want to have you back on the live radio show too.
Sure, that'd be great.
Work.
Well, you can go to the big guys. It's on Amazon. Tony Ray Morris. Look it up under Tony Ray Morris. It's again Deep River Blues. My website is www.tonymorris.org. That's just that, not without the rate. TonyMorris.org. You can also get on for Kobo. It's available at Walmart. It's available at Barnes and Noble. So kind of the big box stores. And don't be afraid to go to the local booksellers. If you're in the Savannah area, well then East Shavers and the Book Lady Bookstore will both, if they're not carrying it already, they'll definitely order it for you and bring it into their bookstore. So just call them up and have them place an order for you and grab a book from one of those folks. Right now it's available in hardcover and the ebook, Kindle and ebook. Once we get through the hardcovers editions, and then we'll probably be coming out in trade paperback. But yeah, and I'm hoping it came out at a strange time because normally I would probably be out touring and doing readings, and you'd be able to get the book if you I read. So I'm trying to figure out how to set up some maybe some virtual readings and interview, kind of like yours, right? And do virtual readings and this is a new kind of game for me though to do that whole virtual thing. So here we go though. We're in a new virtual world.
I love it.
Yes.
Tony. I really honestly feel so. It's such a great pleasure to be able to talk with you today. I mean, like I know it was just kind of random out of the blue. I was so glad that you contacted me yesterday and that we were able to talk today because I feel that you are when I say working class writer, I mean like a person that they do the work, like they constantly are working on it, and you don't wait for inspiration.
I appreciate that.
You do the work, and I feel like that's the difference between like people who are in love with the idea. Like you ever heard of somebody saying, like, oh, you're not in love with me, you're in love with the idea of me, that kind of thing.
Yes.
That's how I feel like,
yes.
Like it's like there are people that are in love with the idea of being a writer. And then there are other people who, when writing is a lot like a marriage, there's work. There's sometimes where it's all just wonderful and just bliss and everything. There's other times where you're like, man, I know I've got to write this scene. I don't want to do it. But I love you, so I'm going to do it anyway,
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm like you. I'm glad we reconnected, and I look forward to more communication with you. And so yeah, any of your listeners, if you want to check out also the Ossabaw Writers Retreat, it's a great little retreat we got going on. We probably won't be doing. We usually do have a retreat in the fall and a retreat in the spring. We're not running the fall because of pandemic, the COVID-19. Yeah. Hopefully spring, and you can go to the website at OssabaWritersRetreat.org and find out more about that. That's OSSABAW, Writers Retreat, all one word, .org. And again, you can check out my website, TonyMorris.org, and find out more about me and my other books. I have my poetry books up there too, and I do have a children's book I wrote many years ago, and so it's available. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Tom. It's really a pleasure. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Just one final note. I will put all the links, everybody. So if you're listening in, the links are going to be right there in the description so that you can go right to Tony Ray's stuff. And thanks again, Tony. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you, Adam. We'll talk to you soon.